All right, we got a great episode coming up for you today. We're going to break down the closer than, took more effort than it should have victory over the Cleveland Cavaliers for our Brooklyn Nets. We dive in on the big performances by Patty Mills and LaMarcus Aldridge. And then, Doug, as is becoming the theme of the podcast, you take offense to the way this coaching staff is executing their rotations.
Well, I get there in the end because I just do a quick reminder that we just need to hit 57 wins. That's the whole goal. You'll see why if you just listen through the podcast. 57 wins or bust. Now, before we get there, I do freak out about a few more of the decisions that happened tonight, maybe on a more of a macro level. We'll get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie, at Doug Norrie on Twitter, blue checkmark certified, delicious and fresh for you. Also, owner-operator, DFSR, your daily fantasy sports rankings, covering you for DraftKings, FanDuel. If you got fantasy questions, Doug has your answers. I'm Adam Armbrecht, also covering the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. And we remind you, of course, this episode today is brought to you by our friends over at McDonald's. They've been proudly serving the communities since 1965, and McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends over at McDonald's for always being there. You know that I'm loving it. Dougster, I welcome you in. 109-99 Brooklyn Nets get a much-needed bounce-back win over the Cleveland Cavaliers in what should have been, but was not necessarily as easy of a victory as we kind of anticipated through much of the first half of this one, let alone over the four quarters.
Yeah, the Nets get gifted an absolute, they get gifted a gift from the scheduling gods with this game against the Cavs because, the Cavs had nobody. And this is one you look at when you look at the starting lineups and see who's out for Cleveland, and you think, okay, they're on the back-to-back. This one should be very easy, it'd be really nice to just blow the doors off these guys by halftime and be done with it and just save everybody, because even though the minutes got buzzed off a little bit in Golden State, it was still, those are a lot of high leverage minutes. That was still the time that those guys were on the court was still there was a ton of exertion there. You would like to have seen this be a lot easier, and man, it just wasn't. And I mean, we could talk about Cleveland, but you and I think we both went into this thinking, hey, maybe we don't have to see the starters for the fourth quarter. You're texting me about we're going to see the rookies.
I was going to say, I was going to take this thing completely off the rails by saying, guess what? We're going to get to go now on the second sample size of the young rookie players. How do we feel about them playing a full 12 minutes and really executing this offense for the Brooklyn Nets? And then instead, what was a 21-point lead at halftime gets completely diminished away in the second half, and it gets a little bit tighter, gets a little bit closer. But stay on Cleveland for a second here, because it's not just about the fact that they're missing some key players like former net Jared Allen. You saw Kevin Love come back for this one after being in protocols, but the team that they put out there on the court, not the team that's 9-5 now, right? This is not NBA quality basketball that you're going up against.
I mean, this is the worst. If this is the team that they had the whole year, this is the worst team in the NBA, and it's not even close. This team's a total joke. And so I get they're dealing with problems. Jared Allen, like you said, is out. Evan Mobley was Rookie of the Year candidate. It was the favorite in the Rookie of the Year candidacy before getting hurt. He's going to be out for a couple weeks now. They'd already lost Colin Sexton. People are mixed on him, but whatever. He's still better than what they were throwing, what was coming in here now. And frankly, some of this Cleveland stuff, if you look at their numbers, there's certain combinations with this Cleveland team, like the Rubio plus Garland plus one of the bigs numbers, are actually really good. There would have been times where I was like, oh, this is a pretty exciting matchup to be able to see this, because this is those combinations are very good. This just wasn't it. I mean, this is Taco Fall's getting run. Ed Davis is starting. It's a total joke. I got
to say, Taco Falls, even in the NBA, looks like an unnatural human amongst other humans, right? Yeah. The guy's enormous. It's just such a weird, when a guy like that sets out on the court, you go, I mean, Kevin Durant looks small next to him. It's
Throws
just
you off.
an odd combination. And what was that?
It throws you off. Yeah, like
Yeah,
you're
it
like you
does.
need to do. You're doing a little double take. Hey, my final thing on this is this team is terrible. Like I don't want to undersell it. Like this cannot be undersold. This team is awful, and to have it even be close is not alarming. They won. It's a W at the end of the season. We're not going to think about it. But this should never in a million years have been a 10-point game. Like there's just no way. There's 2.5 NBA rotation players, 3.5 NBA rotation players that are playing in this game basically. And for them to struggle kind of near the end is it's not alarming, but it's just another one of it would have been nice to have gone a different way with this.
Yes, and we're going to get into the play of Patty Mills, the play of LaMarcus Aldridge, and how that really helped the Nets get this win, and then talk about this last couple of games, some of the contrast between the Golden State Warriors matchup and then this one against Cleveland. But in terms of game flow in this one, now there is also this reoccurring theme over the last couple where the Nets seem to be a little sluggish in the third quarter. They also seem to take their time getting started in games, and by whatever standard you want to hold the Nets to me, like, and I know that the NBA's game of runs, and this one had it, but it was like the Nets had multiple double-digit runs in the first half alone. When you close out the first half 31-16 against this Cleveland team, like, you're supposed to come out in the third quarter and say, we're done here. Like, all jokes aside about seeing the rookies, you're supposed to be emptying out anybody else but the starters. It's not supposed to be that at one point in the fourth quarter, Cleveland gets it down to a 6.7-point game, and you're actually wondering here, hey, we're one weird bounce of the ball one way or the other of being in a 1 or 2 possession game. Like, that to me is concerning, even if it is on a back-to-back.
Yeah, because with the way the schedule works out, what you would like to have seen here is they're on the back-to-back. We knew the Golden State game, even with the blowout, was going to be a fight no matter what. It ends up being not as much of one as we wanted it to be. But again, it's still high leverage minutes for a lot of these guys. Yep. To see this team come in, to look across the aisle and say, oh, it's Dean Wade and Ed Davis, like, the ghost of Ed Davis, and this is what they're, Okoro's whatever, and no bench at all. Like, there's just no way. Yeah, there's just no way this should have happened. So, like, I'll say this, and I hate to overreact to this because this stuff, it might not matter in the end. Kevin Durant playing 37 minutes in this game on a back-to-back is a disaster. There's no way it should happen. This is the game you have to say, like, we have to find ways to it can't be hard. Like, and so, look, a week from now, are we thinking about it? Maybe not, and again, it's a win, and they win by 10 and whatever. And I know he didn't even end up closing out the game, but it just should not have been this hard when you look at the collective NBA talent or lack thereof on the other side of the ball. There's just no way it should have played out this way. And I hate to be frustrated about this stuff, but this stuff, when you're on the championship run, does matter. It does matter to be able to save this in this exactly perfect scenario that they were handed and still could not take advantage of.
And you think about the Friday night matchup with the Magic, right? And Harden went 37 minutes in this game too. So it's almost like, hey, you felt like you gotten run a little bit ragged off that Golden State Warriors game against the schedule sets up for you to be able to take it easy here. And not overreacting, but examining this stuff to your point about championships. Well, this is kind of like when you think you're a title contender, it's all the devil in the details, right? It's none of the, big scoring performance from random player. Like, we know Kevin Durant and James Harden are going to score a lot of points, right? Like, we know that certain guys are going to fill their roles the way that we expect them to. What ends up happening is saying, is this coaching staff ready to be monitoring minutes, to be managing how these players get rest on back-to-backs and over the course of 3 games and 4 nights we saw early in the year over a 6-game road trip? And even though it is early, the only way that I won't be concerned about it going forward is if at some point we just kind of see in the midpoint of the season ahead of the All-Star break that the staff has had this thing in their mind of, that's it. We're shutting you down. We're shutting player X, player Y. I want to follow up on that with one more takeaway that Steve Nash had mentioned in some of the pregame conversations around it. But before we do, just got to tell everybody about our friends over at betonline.ag, because they're back and they're better than ever this season with an updated interface and website. All those basketball props, odds, and lines are there for you, and even more than they've ever had before. They remain your number one spot for all the basketball and football action throughout this season. You head over to that updated website and you can get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using promo code Locked On. That's a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with promo code Locked On. Basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, and all your favorite Vegas casino games. Get over to betonline.ag and take advantage of all the amazing offers on the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So quickly before we move on to Mills and on to Aldridge, Steve Nash had said in the pregame, coming out of the Golden State, said we're not a championship caliber team at this moment right now. We have a lot of things to figure out. There is a lot to clean up. And he mentioned in that statement about we came in with a continuity plan and a strategy for how we wanted to integrate 10 new players, when you include the rookies, into what we're doing here. And it kind of got thrown off when Kai decided not to come back. And he just said that, boom, done. So that's maybe the part where I give a little bit of grace to this coaching staff, where I go, also, you're missing one of the obviously most important pieces to this process for you that would make it easier to be flexible around a lot of these things.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is that through the whole season, it's made it tumultuous in a way that they didn't want it to be, and it frankly shouldn't be. And we don't need to rehash this. And frankly, we've talked about it less than I thought we would have. I thought at this point we would have talked about it way more. We just sort of haven't had to need to up to this point, right? So because the season for the most part has been going pretty well. I'm not surprised that integrating a lot of new players is already hard. Losing your third best player is a third best player, and it's not even he's way better than almost any other team's third best player, right? So losing this, having this go this way is super difficult. And I'm for all that, and in the context of this game, I still think that gets washed away because we're talking about a team that's missing 3 of its 4 best players.
right. Shouldn't even be a factor in this particular game, unlike maybe some other opportunities. Right. I know we're going to get back into the coaching situation after we talk about the reason why ultimately I think the Nets won this game, and that's in the absence of Joe Harris. Patty Mills now second consecutive start is his replacement, and then also LaMarcus Aldridge and what he was able to do in this game. You choose. Who do you want to focus on first here as far as veteran performances that, again, Katie's did what he did. I thought that Harden had a better game in basically the same kind of stat line, but these two players were the reason why the Nets got the win.
All right, so I think I have more to say about Aldridge, so let's just talk about Patty Mills real quick. So the Patty Mills in the starting lineup totally works. It works. His off-ball stuff is at the same sort of level of gravity as Joe Harris, which is great. We kind of knew that to be the case. It's not a surprise. Our concern around Patty Mills starting was never around Patty Mills. It was around what happens after Patty Mills. Because before it's Joe Harris and then into Patty Mills, this was Patty Mills into question mark. And so I think that was, there was never a part. We knew that the Patty Mills thing would work with the starting lineup. We see it now, right? It's you have to guard him at the 3-point line. He can actually do a little more on ball stuff than Joe Harris can. I'm not surprised that part is working at all. And this is exactly why you signed him, because you're going to need situations like this that he's going to be able to need to knock down a bunch of threes or just, knock down open catch and shoot, 3-pointers that he's going to get in this offense. And credit to him, he's been worth every penny and more since they brought him in, because I think the Nets are getting even more than they expected out of him, right? They needed to. They've needed to because by necessity, but this far exceeds even what I thought he was going to bring. And so that is not saved the season, but it's been awesome. I don't think you need to be any kind of basketball expert to watch Patty Mills and say, oh, he shoots the ball and it goes in. It's right. It's pretty easy to say.
And before we get to Aldridge, because that's where I think we want to focus quickly, was you mentioned it, needing him to do it, right? You want Patty Mills to be almost this supercharged luxury that you have. So this early in the season to say that you need Patty Mills to be this effective in order to be winning games is probably not the way the Nets had it lined up. And Joe Harris going to Patty Mills is so dangerous against other teams as opposed to where they are now. And I'll just supplement it with saying, in this game where Patty Mills knocked down 50%, 6 of 12 from beyond the arc, the Nets were only 12 of 32 from deep. So they were 6 for 20 without Patty Mills. And if you look inside some of the other players, especially let's say like a Javon Carter, because he's a guy you're going to look to maybe take a couple of those perimeter shots without Joe Harris. This is the trickle down effect that we talk about. You lose Joe Harris, now Patty Mills gets pushed up, and just collectively on this team, the 3-point shooting, it's Joe Harris, it's Patty Mills, and then it's maybe some other guys, right? Obviously Harden can do it. It's not the number 1 or 2 element that Kevin Durant's going to go to in his game either. So that's the impact that we always talked about, less about the player himself and more about the construction of the roster and what you want to be able to do effectively. LaMarcus Aldridge, on the other hand, is a guy who is evergreen with his mid-range jumper. It was ultra effective in this game. I think it was part of the reason that helped Harden have an effective game as well. Go ahead, Doug. You get to take the floor because you were on this hot button topic going back to the loss against Golden State.
Why didn't he start? I just don't. I hate to look. We've been now it's going to be a couple podcasts in a row here where it's going to sound like we're kind of critical of the staff. I think they probably need to take some heat here because there was, I think, an abject mishandling of the LaMarcus Aldridge situation against the Warriors. In that, if you have a thing that you can do well, you need to be able to see if that thing that you do well is better than the what you think the downside is going to be about the thing that it doesn't happen that goes well, right? And so, what the context for that is against the Warriors, his switching defense is going to be really problematic because he's going to get hunted down on switches. He's not at the speed that which those guys play, and to just kind of call the ball early on that, we both thought was very weird. And then he comes in and plays, and it looks terrible and whatever. But I still think they should have tried it because I think you need to stick to I still think you're at this point of the season where you need to stick to your guns around the things that work and then have it proven or disproven, right? Rather than just guessing at it early. Does that make sense?
Because you would say Golden State Warriors game, maybe it is going to be bad for LaMarcus Aldridge in that game, but this is our game. This is what we do, right?
Sure.
Now,
yes.
Tell us that it's not going to work against you, Golden State, and then we'll adjust. When you come into the game effectively adjusting before the tip-off, it feels like you're saying, well, yeah, that's it. We can't do that. Like we can't go to our fourth best scorer right now for this offense. We can't use them. And in doing so, regardless of what the results may have been, but coming into that game, you effectively take what his averages are, 12 to 15 to 18 points out of your rotation, and then you start to look around and say, how do you pick up that slack? And I'm willing.
Okay, well, there's a second piece
and agree with you about that.
Here's the second piece. The second piece is that at this point, it's very clear that Blake Griffin needs a rest, and because his game has deteriorated pretty severely here, and like on both ends of the court, it's because he's doing so much. He's doing way more physical wise than he's probably ever had to really do in his career. He's on the ground half the time because he's taking charges. He's banging bodies on the interior because he's playing a lot of center minutes that is just not something he's had to do a lot in his career, especially defensively. And so he could have just used the rest. And he kind of effectively got it. He only played 18 minutes in this game, but at that point, it's almost like weird because the thing that you think was not going to happen against the Warriors on Tuesday, you actually know for certainty that Aldridge will destroy this group. Yeah. It was the way they started this game with the bigs that they have with no Mobley and Allen. This is actually the exact time to give one guy a rest and bring in Aldridge and just have him murder these guys. If you're going to be willing to play him, what he played 30 minutes. If you're going to be willing to do this already, just start out that way. Give the one guy a rest. Have this just be over, right? And actually take a little bit of a load off Durant and Harden. And this isn't revisionist either. This is obvious to begin with. And so I just don't understand. I kind of just don't understand what's going on. It's a little bit weird to me with these rotations and just the management of the minutes. And especially around things that are super clear. Blake Griffin just needs a rest. LaMarcus Aldridge is made for it. You brought him in for this exact matchup is why you have LaMarcus Aldridge, because he will crush this matchup. And
will you allow for the fact that once Aldridge came in, because I don't know exactly when he came in to enter the game, but would it be possible to say the staff said, yes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to LaMarcus Aldridge and we're going to give him a big workload, 30 minutes in this game, and they intentionally structured it that way. I would still agree with you. Don't bother. Just sit down, Blake. Give Johnson more minutes, right? Give James Johnson more minutes. Spread it around wherever you need to. And maybe as much as it is about you should have started LaMarcus Aldridge, it's also about Blake Griffin never should have stepped on the court in any capacity in this one.
Yeah, maybe I'm complaining too much about a thing that kind of just happened anyway, and I'm willing to accept that because maybe the result just ends up being that way, and so fine. What's the complaint? I guess my point is, I, I just don't understand. I guess I just don't understand the 18 minutes from Blake. I don't understand what happened with Aldridge against the Warriors. It all feels a little confusing. You actually, if you want to rest into, you want to rest him on the front end because you think it's a problem, then just take advantage of the rest on the back end, like more functionally, rather than just sort of. I mean, maybe they just did kind of more figure it out during the game, and he played 30 minutes. Because if you're so confident in the plan, you just do start him. I
agree with you because I'm making that statement as here's an explanation why it went that way. And we talked about, even go back to last year, right? The ceremonial starts for a given player. And then ultimately, though, this is the guy who plays more minutes by the end of the game. And that's fine. But I tend to lean towards you, right? Because again, it's the same thing about the Golden State Warriors game where you go, it just feels like the thing that you probably, if asked in the press conference, you'd say, yep, LaMarcus Aldridge has a great matchup opportunity against the Cavs. Then you would say, so shouldn't he be starting? Like, well, we'll see what happens, right? It just doesn't, something about that gets lost in there. Quickly, remind everybody we appreciate making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all those platforms, and we continue to give you all the great content that you come back and support us for. I want to go down a little bit deeper on than this rabbit hole because the one piece is Aldridge does play 30 minutes in those one. On the regular season so far, he's averaging 20 minutes. He's actually been very effective on being selective from the outside in his three-point attempts. That's come up a little bit more over the last handful of games that he's played in. The numbers are there. He's averaging 12 points. He had an even bigger performance in this one, obviously. But on the Blake Griffin piece, you said about he does need a game off. He does need rest. Do you think that there's anything here, though, as far as the way the lineup is being constructed right now, where if Blake Griffin this season is leaning even harder into the blue-collar boys mentality and doing all the dirty things, do they need to look at their rotations and say, how do we make it so that Blake Griffin doesn't need to do anything offensively beyond the casual pick and roll or dive to the basket? Because there's still this element where Griffin is still trying to take those perimeter looks. He's still trying to get that part of his game. And Nash said it. I want him to keep shooting. Harden wants him to keep shooting. But you saw all the body language from Griffin in this game from the tip was down on himself, disappointed, frustrated. And again, ultimately looked like he was tired. But I just wonder, and we've talked about this at the start of the year too, right? Like, is it just going to be about getting him rest, or is it going to be about this coaching staff looking at him and redefining even a little bit further what his role is on this team?
I mean, his role right now in these last couple of games has kind of been nothing. I don't even know you can't really ask him to do less on the offensive end. They've really asked him to do almost nothing. He's not going to the rim, like those little pump fakes that he gives that no one except for Darius Baisley has ever fallen for is like it's just not effective. I really do think he just needs some games off. And that's not a mental thing. And I feeling down on yourself, whatever. He was never going to be asked to take huge loads in the offense anyway. You would like him to be able to hit, X percentage of his threes on the ones that he's going to get. I just really think he just needs to take a game or two off, which is not a knock. The guy has been asked to do a ton. He's very old. The guy's got a long medical history. He's had a million surgeries over his career, right? Like he was effectively, people just kind of thought he was done in Detroit. He has reinvented himself here. It's been way better than expected. So this is not a Blake Griffin knock. He's just an old guy that's got a ton of miles on him. He's got a lot of time under the knife. And at some point, you're also asking him to play a very, very physical position where you're asking him to bang bodies with guys that are just going to a lot of times be bigger than him or just kind of just younger and more physical. He's getting in there. He takes a ton of charges, all this stuff. He's leaned into that, the blue collar boy thing. It's all awesome. And at some point, you just kind of need some time off to recuperate a little bit. And I really think it's probably as simple as that. And again, I just find it weird that they're not doing it. This isn't the Blake Griffin piece. Like, we don't need to make the whole entire podcast about Blake Griffin.
Oh, yeah.
I do think it speaks to a little bit of these question marks I'm having around some of the stuff with the coaching staff here about what is happening. Because, like, just play James Johnson 30 minutes in this game. The Cavs stink. They stink. This team is terrible. Like, this is the exact game to rest guys. I don't know why. I cannot understand why they don't do it.
Yeah, well, so quickly on Blake Griffin, I think we go back to the start of the season in terms of shot selection. The last 3 games, he's put up a combined average 2 outside shots per game. I think that's where he should be living right now until something comes back around. He's only shooting 17% from beyond the arc, but he's put up 35 attempts so far this year. It's just the volume is a little bit too high for a guy who's only a career 33 point percentage shooter from the outside anyway. So that's on him. See where that goes. But then the James Johnson thing. Well, this is a guy who's come and gone, and we're not setting the benchmark of James Johnson should be getting big minute shares consistently. But this is the perfect game, to your point of just, by the way, this is the perfect game where throw some Day'Ron Sharpe out there. I know you may push back on this piece of it because he's the rookies and everything else, but this is how bad this Cleveland team is with everything they're dealing with. You could have run out Day'Ron Sharpe for 15 minutes in this game if you wanted to. Just to save Blake Griffin.
Oh, yeah.
Put Blake Griffin on the bench, use a bunch of James Johnson, throw in some Day'Ron Sharpe, give me LaMarcus Aldridge, and be done with it. And this is where, as you say, from a coaching staff perspective, it feels like they're a step late on the decisions about protecting the veterans on this team from getting worn down far too early. Because if it gets to the point where we are with Blake and you go, maybe you just got to sit him down for a few games to give him some rest. Well, we're only 15 games in. Like, this is supposed to be, if you give them every 4th game half a nice rest, right? You reduce the minutes a little bit. That's how you get to the entire season with never having to get too extreme with it. It does feel like, and we haven't even mentioned that we have in past episodes that Millsap has been away, Claxton with his illness. So there is also a limited amount of resources on this bench right now for the coaching staff. But at this point, against certain matchups, go as deep as you need to, including the rookies, to save some of the legs on the age.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. You can play these guys. They probably should have played a few minutes here and there. I just don't. I hate to harp on it. Look, and should we be this negative after a win? No. Again, they're 11-5. It's been a very successful season so far. It has not gone the way anyone's expected to in terms of personnel, just because of the stuff we already mentioned. I get it. They're dealing with a lot of like sort of externality around their lineup that they did not envision. I get it. It's hard. Yeah. Like I'm not saying this is easy, and I'm not saying all the decisions are super easy going in. All I'm saying is that they have to be thinking about this stuff maybe a little bit more than they have been. And this game provided that perfect example of a time where it could have been done, even with all those other problems, and it just wasn't. And you just see another game of 18 minutes of Blake like looking tired, and we see Aldridge being able to crush these guys. And I don't think there's almost any world where they lose the game, even if they get 10 minutes out of some of these other young guys, because they're just not going. It's just not. It's going to be in the end, it's going to be very hard to lose to this Cavs team. Like, you would have to really actively try. Like, we're complaining about a 10-point victory. That's how bad the team is. Like,
because to close out on a positive note, to your point, this is a game that they were up by 20, and I think there's that element of it. When a team is as bad as the Cavs were or are right now, you can't give up that lead. Like I say, can't get that close. You should be able to get some guys on the bench and get some rookie minutes in. Okay, fine. The other piece, though, is your schedule is what it is. They have dealt with a ton of things, and the bottom line, we'd be talking about it way differently if they had lost this game somehow. So if you think we've been a little negative on this,
I wouldn't be able to do the podcast. I wouldn't be able to get on. You would have to do a solo podcast. If they had lost this game, I just don't even. I would have just. I don't know what I would have done. I would have been beside myself. I'm freaking out about a 10-point victory. So
well, and by the way, and to that point, it's that you look around the Eastern Conference and we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. They didn't have Drew Holiday to start the year. They haven't had Brook Lopez. They're dealing with some things. They're going to get back on track. I think that the expectations are so high for a lot of these teams. The Nets have 11 wins. The Nets are right at the top of the Eastern Conference. So there is that part of it of you can look back at the schedule and look at the opponents and say there's a lot of easy wins there. Yeah, guess what? But you have to go and win them, right? And at least banking these now for everything that the Nets are dealing with does afford them at some point maybe to just sacrifice a game or two to make sure that they get these guys rest. So there is that silver lining to it. When you have we're previewing tomorrow, the Orlando game. You look over the schedule, there's a lot of these kind of, hey, pick up a win here if you want, friends. As we move through the 15-20 game mark, with everything that came in this year, we could have had them be 10-10 through 20 games, and I wouldn't even be breaking a sweat. Like that, you
don't think so? I think we'd be, if they were 10-10 right now, you'd be worried. I know I think I understand the general, like, sort of gestalt of what you're saying, but if they were 10-10, that means,
if you look over the schedule, maybe I'd say, wow, there had to be a handful of bad losses there. But if you told me you're not going to have Kyrie to start the year and you're going to lose Joe Harris for 3 or 4 games, I wouldn't be. I might be concerned, but I'd say,
and
okay,
by the way, and Millsap and Claxton. Claxton's basically sat out the entire season. Like, he's been out the whole year too. So
right. So if you told me that all those things were going to happen to this team, and by the way, and that James Harden was going to adjust to a new refereeing style, et cetera, and that he was coming off his hamstring injury, all those things considered, if they were 10-10 through 20 games, I would probably say, okay, the next 15-20 games are really important. Obviously, I want to see them start to get on a run, but they could have been around 500, and I wouldn't be that concerned. They're 11-4. So at this point, with everything that's gone on, I'll be very curious to see as James Harden continues to figure things out and get healthier, as hopefully Millsap or Claxton and somebody else gets back in the room, and then Joe Harris comes back in a few games. Like, another 15-20 games from now, what's the record going to look like, and what are we going to be looking at? It's going to get back to where we were at the start of the year, getting everyone into their roles, managing minutes, and figuring things out. It is just hard because right now, short of seeing how certain roles are going to get filled because guys haven't been available, you do start to kind of crack down on some of the fine details with this coaching staff and say, in absence of other things to examine, there's no Kyrie news. I'm going to look at you guys and say, I want to know that you guys are a well-oiled machine, because that's going to matter just as much as anything over the course of the 82-game season.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if they're 10-10 or something like that, I'd be looking at my 56.5 over bet on the wins and figuring out how we're going to make that money back, because at that point you are looking at one bet that would probably be dead in the water. Thankfully, hey, that's why I'm still happy about all these wins. Let's keep trucking to 57 wins. 57 wins, we take our foot off the gas and we're done and whatever.
As soon as we cross that threshold, Doug will be fine.
But let's be very clear, we need to hit 57 before anyone can Blake Griffin, get out there and play 30 minutes a game. We need you, pal. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Go make sure you get over to YouTube. All the episodes and more are going up over there. Have great conversations, a lot of comments. We'll be doing a mailbag on Friday for Friday's episode. We've already got a couple people that have thrown questions up into YouTube that we've already taken note of that we're going to try to get to. So go over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, jump into the comments. It's all happening over there. Really excited about the growth that we've seen. Like and subscribe over on the Locked On Nets YouTube channel.
And hey, let's go out on a positive note, my friends. Promise me, Doug Norrie, that you'll always remember you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. A.M. Milne. I was
take it to your heart. Take it to your heart.
Oh, 100 Acre Wood. I got you. From the heart of the 100 Acre Wood. We got there. All right, we'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.